So today is new phone unboxing day, and I'm going to be looking at today the new Honor 400 Smart. I picked it up on Amazon, about 170 quid, and it actually sits slightly below the Honor 400 Lite in terms of its specs and price. So we're just going to open the box, do a quick setup and just see what this phone is about ahead of my full review. And be among the first to see that when that goes live, hit subscribe on the channel. Let's get into it. Okay, so here's my very quick unboxing and setup of the brand new Honor 400 Smart. I've got the phone with 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage in Meteor Silver. So like I said, this actually sits below the Honor 400 Lite in terms of its specs and price. So we'll just see what it's like. NFC, lovely. So on the top, you just get the phone. We'll just set that aside for a second. And then under that, you get a little package with your SIM tray, SIM tool, and USB-C charging cable. Whack that aside for a second. So here is the Honor 400 Smart. And there it is in comparison to the 400 Lite. It's actually quite considerably bigger, certainly in height, and it's a little bit wider as well. So we'll just peel off this bit on the front, screen protector applied. We'll just power the phone on, see if she's got any juice. The phone's also available in black as well, but I find that black's a little bit boring, so I had to pick it up in silver. Okay, so when the phone's booted up, you are greeted with the usual setup bit. So you've got some relatively chunky bezels around the edge of the device and then a even thicker chin on the bottom. It is just a 720p display, so you don't unfortunately get a 1080p display like what you find on all of the other phones in the Honor 400 series. Okay, so after you've added your Wi-Fi and your Google information in, you'll be greeted with this screen asking who will be using the device. It'll be me, but there is an option if your kid's going to be using it. And then just agree to the usual bits and bobs. And then the rest of the slow and tedious parts about setting up a new phone. So we'll just accept all of those bits and bobs. I don't want to back up just yet. I will pick Google as my search engine. All your bits for hands-free Gemini, data and privacy information. I won't log into my Honor ID just yet, but I do have a setup. But of course, if you want to create one, you can obviously do all of that. So let's set up the fingerprint. Oh, let's do a pin first. And then we'll set up the fingerprint using the side-mounted fingerprint scanner, which is about typical on a phone at this price, although the 400 Lite does have an in-display fingerprint scanner, which is a nice sort of more premium feature on a budget device. But 400 Smart, just a side-mounted. They're normally pretty responsive. This one does seem a little bit slower, but we'll see what it's like when it comes to actually unlocking the device. Set up Face ID later, and then just enable the more enhanced services offered by Honor. And then you get the option to choose gesture support for swiping and etc., or you can choose 3 keys. I will stick to gestures. I don't need a tutorial. And that is the Honor 400 Smart out of the box. So like I said, you get a 6.7 inch 120 Hz 720p display. Of course, not as premium as what you'd find on the Honor 400 Lite, which I haven't turned on, so we'll turn that one on a minute. And out of the box, there's no apps tray. So we'll jump into the settings and that'll be the first thing to do. So go to home screen and style, home screen style, and then select apps drawer. And then it should just reconfigure. And then still got apps there, but then you've got your apps drawer as well. So there's not a huge amount on this device. There's a couple of preloaded games, there's booking.com, but other than that, it seems relatively clean as far as Magic OS goes. And then if we jump into the settings very quickly, system and updates, software updates, and we are up to date on Magic OS 9. Let's just get the 400 light all set up and then potentially buzzing like you wouldn't believe with loads of notifications coming through, no doubt. I've turned it on silent. So there we go. Back onto that and then go to About Phone. So we're rocking a Snapdragon 6S Gen 3, which is a pretty typical budget mobile platform. I've used it before. I think the Motorola G85 had that processor. It was good enough for me. 4 gigs of base RAM, which is of course on the lower end, but you can expand it with an extra 4 gigs from the memory, which is set at 128 gigabytes, and you get no expandable storage. You get a whopping 6,500 milliamp hour battery, which should translate into some incredible battery life. If you pair that with the low end processor, 720p display, you should get some awesome battery life. And then we are on Android 15 with Magic OS 9 on top. So then if you go back, you've just got the usual settings options. I'm not going to go through every single one, but I will go into the customization part and you can select extra wallpapers, although it's not going to let me do a huge amount because I haven't logged into my Honor ID. Let's see if it will let me just look at a couple. It will let me look, but it won't let me download, so that'll do. So there's loads of different ones that you can select. Or if you go on me, there's 3 preloaded on there, which you can choose from. But like I said, create yourself an Honor ID and you can download loads for free, or if you really want to, you can pay for some, which I don't do. And then you can go on to themes where you can change the whole layout of your phone. Although it's doing something. And then again, you can go into more themes. We'll update it later. And again, top free. There we go. So yeah, there's a few free ones that you can get. There we go. And that will change the entire layout of your phone, not just the wallpaper. And then if you go back again, you can change fonts, you can change icons, etc. And then display and brightness, of course, you can flip between light and dark mode. And because it's just an IPS display, you don't get the really deep blacks that you would normally get from an AMOLED display. But you've got the usual options. You've got eye comfort modes. You can change the fonts and the font size. You can change the display size, the color temperature. It's set to vivid by default. And then the screen refresh rate, you can change from dynamic, which will change between 60 and 120 Hertz, depending on what you're doing. Standard at 60 Hertz to save power, not that I think you'll need to do that. And then you've got 120 Hertz all the time, which I don't think is really necessary in my personal opinion. And then of course you get all of the usual other bits and bobs, biometrics and password, which we touched on a little bit with that fingerprint scanner, which I'll double check how quick that is in a second. Battery information. Of course, there's no battery usage at the moment, and you've got your various modes, so performance mode, etc., power saving. And then if we go into storage, it will give you a breakdown of where your storage is. So the majority of it on here is of course from the system. Other, will it let me find out what other is? Oh, other includes cache, logs, necessary resources, etc. And then a couple of gigs for your apps as well. So if we just go back into the home screen and then we'll just double check this fingerprint scanner, nice and responsive, pretty good if I do say so. So let's just quickly check out this camera. So you get just a 50 megapixel main camera, and then that is backed with, oh, nothing's come through yet. Right, 50 megapixel main camera backed with a 2 megapixel depth camera. So we'll just take one there, and then you've got a 2x crop option as well, which you can take a look at. Of course, in this lighting, it's not going to be the best, but I will be doing a bit more of a breakdown in my full review, so definitely get subscribed to see that. Video mode tops out at 1080p at 30 FPS. You also get a pro mode, and then if you tap more, there's a few more options there as well. And then if I just take a quick selfie with the 5 megapixel selfie camera. Wow, I could have at least looked as if I was looking at the camera. Let's try that again. There we go, that's a little bit better. Crazy hair. So yeah, 5 megapixel selfie camera, not going to be anything special. It is pretty typical to have that sort of selfie camera on a budget phone like this. And then of course you can swipe left for your Google News feed, etc. I'm not going to run any benchmarks on this because what's the point? For those watching this video, 9 times out of 10, you'll know what the Snapdragon 6S Gen 3 is going to be about. And then you've got Optimizer app as well that will just clear any bits and bobs off your phone just to make it run a little bit smoother. So that's just a very quick look at the Honor 400 Smart. Overall, it's just going to be a very basic phone, but I will be doing a more in-depth review, of course. I could potentially even compare it to the Honor 400 Lite, and as you can see, the difference between the two is almost night and day. If we jump into the settings on both, just so you can see, let's turn off dark mode a second. There you go. So you can really see the difference in the bezels. The screen quality is, of course, much nicer on the Honor 400 Lite. But off of these first impressions, do let me know what you think of this. I mean, it could be all right for some people, but we'll find out in my full review if it really is worth buying. So that is just my very quick look at this Honor 400 Smart. Now, I do have some first opinions. I'm not going to tell you them just yet. I'm not going to give too much away of whether this is going to be worth buying. Definitely get subscribed to see my full review, which I will be dropping in a few weeks after I've had a chance to test out this phone, chuck my SIM card in it and just use it as my full-time phone for a week or a few days or whatever, just to get a bit of an idea. So if you're interested in seeing that video, like I said, definitely get subscribed to the channel. I've got plenty more reviews on my channel on Honor phones, including the Honor 400 Lite, which has apparently just disappeared off my desk, the regular Honor 400, Honor 400 Pro, and loads of other budget and mid-range phones. So I'll see you in the next one. Can't wait.